Imagine being fired by the coldest man in Seoul. Not laid off. Not downsized. Personally, publicly fired. He looked at you like you were a mistake he was correcting. And then imagine that same man 3 weeks later, standing in the rain outside your apartment, saying he'll lose everything. His company, his reputation, his entire world, if you don't marry him. Not a proposal. Confession. This is that story. Adis no Konkwo was not supposed to be in Korea. She was supposed to be finishing her master's in biomedical engineering at the University of Michigan. She was supposed to be the one in her family who did everything right, the daughter of 2 Nigerian immigrants who had spent 30 years in Detroit building a life that was one missed paycheck from collapsing. Her father drove a bus on the east side. Her mother was a home health aide who came home smelling like other people's houses and never once complained about it. Adis had been valedictorian of her high school. Full academic scholarship. Dean's List every semester. She had been accepted into the combined MS/PhD program at Michigan with a full research assistantship in the tissue engineering lab. She was on track. On plan. On schedule. Then her mother got sick. Not the kind of sick where you take medicine and get better. The kind of sick where the doctor sits down and the chair scrapes the floor and the room gets smaller. Chronic kidney disease. Stage 4. Her father's insurance, the city plan, covered the basics. It didn't cover the kind of care that would keep her mother alive long enough to see her daughter graduate. Adis had heard about a research fellowship at BioSeoul Technologies, a biotech firm in Seoul that was doing pioneering work in bioartificial organ scaffolding. The fellowship paid 3 times as much as her assistantship. It came with housing, health insurance, and something called a family medical stipend that could be applied to a parent's treatment in a partner hospital network that included Detroit Medical Center. She applied. She was accepted. She told herself it was temporary. 2 years. She'd finish the research, publish the paper, save her mother, and go home. She did not tell her mother the real reason she was leaving. She said it was an incredible opportunity. Her mother said she was proud. Her father said nothing. He just held her at the airport for a long time, the way fathers do when they're holding everything they can't say. BioSeoul Technologies operated out of a glass tower in Gangnam that reflected the city like a challenge. Everything about the building communicated precision, the kind of precision that is less about excellence and more about control. The CEO was Choi Min-soo. He was 38. He had built BioSeoul from a university lab into a publicly traded company, worth 2.3 trillion won in 9 years. He had been on the cover of Forbes Korea twice. He did not give interviews. He did not attend company socials. He did not smile in photographs. He sat in meetings the way other men stand, with a kind of gravitational authority that made people adjust their posture without realizing it. He had a reputation. Not the kind that got written down, the kind that traveled through whisper networks. Choi Min-soo did not tolerate mistakes. He did not repeat himself. He did not explain his decisions to anyone, including his board. He had fired senior executives in front of their teams. He had canceled contracts worth billions because the other side had been 5 minutes late to dinner. People were afraid of him. People were also magnetically drawn to him, the way you're drawn to a storm when you're safe inside. From a distance, his control looked like strength. Up close, it looked like something else entirely. Adis met him on her first day. He was walking through the research wing. Not a tour. Not an inspection. Just movement, the way certain people move through their own spaces, confirming that everything is still in its place. He paused at her lab station. She was calibrating a bioprinter nozzle. She did not stop working when he appeared. She did not look up. He stood there for 12 seconds. She knew because she counted them later, trying to understand why the air had changed. "What's your name?" he said. "Adis Konkwo. Research Fellow, Tissue Engineering. Where did you study?" "University of Michigan." "You're Korean." "Conversational." "Improving daily." He looked at her for another moment. Something moved through his expression, too quickly to read. Then he walked away. He did not introduce himself. He did not need to. Everyone in the building had already told her everything about him except the one thing that mattered. For 11 months, Adis worked at BioSeoul and Choi Min-soo pretended she did not exist. Not hostility. Not avoidance. Something more specific than that. Something that looked like a man making a deliberate, daily decision not to look at something he had already looked at once. He restructured the research division twice. Her team was moved to a different floor. Her project was reclassified. She was reassigned to the organ scaffold initiative, the company's most important project. She did not ask why. She assumed it was because her work was good. It was. She had published 2 papers in 9 months, and her scaffold architecture was outperforming every other design in the lab. What she did not know was that Choi Min-soo had personally read every paper, that he had pulled her lab logs and reviewed her data, that he had sat alone in his office at 1 a.m. reading her methodology with the kind of attention he had not given to another human being in years. She did not know this because he never told her. He never told anyone. He simply ensured that her work had every resource it needed, funding, equipment, access, without ever appearing to be the source. The decisions moved through channels. Approvals came from committees. Everything deniable. In the hallway they passed each other. He nodded once. She nodded back. The exchange lasted 2 seconds. It happened 4 times in 11 months. She was not invisible to him. She was the opposite of invisible. She was the thing he was most aware of in a building full of things he controlled. And control was the only language he knew. The problem was never Adiz's work. The problem was politics. Biosol was preparing for a secondary offering. The underwriters wanted a clean narrative, innovative products, stable leadership, no risk factors. The organ scaffold project was the crown jewel. But the clinical timeline had slipped. The board wanted a target date that the science couldn't support. Min-soo had pushed back. The board had pushed harder. He needed someone to take the weight of the delay. Not a scapegoat that was too crude. A restructuring. A narrative adjustment. A research fellow whose visa status made her easy to replace and impossible for the board to question. He knew what he was doing. He sat with the decision for 6 days. He did not sleep for 3 of them. On the 7th day, he signed the termination and walked it to HR himself. He did not send someone else. He did not delegate. He carried it himself, the way certain men carry the things they know they will never be forgiven for. The meeting lasted 4 minutes. He told her the fellowship was being terminated due to restructuring. He told her she would receive 3 months severance and assistance with visa transition. He did not look away from her face while he said it. He watched her receive the information, and something in the way she received it, not with tears, not with anger, with a stillness that was worse than both, made him feel something he had no framework for. She stood up. She placed the termination letter on his desk, precisely centered. "Is there anything else, Mr. Choi?" "No." She walked out. She did not slam the door. She closed it with exactly the amount of force it required. No more. No less. Even in the way she left, she was precise. Controlled. Better at it than he was, and they both knew it. He sat in his office for 45 minutes after she left. He did not work. He did not call anyone. He sat and listened to the silence she had left behind, and he understood, with the specific, terrible clarity that only comes when it's too late, that he had just made the worst decision of his life. Adiz did not crumble. She could have. No one would have blamed her. The fellowship was her visa, her income, her mother's medical stipend, the entire architecture of the plan that had brought her across the world. Without it, she had 60 days before she had to leave Korea. She went home to her small apartment in Haebangkan, the neighborhood near Itaewon where foreigners and artists lived in buildings too old for Gangnam standards. She sat at her kitchen table. She made a list. Her mother's treatment was the priority. She called Detroit. She called the hospital billing department. She called the insurance company. She spent 4 hours on the phone understanding exactly what the loss of the stipend meant. It meant her mother's dialysis schedule would be reduced. It meant the transplant list position, which she had been carefully maintaining through documentation and follow-ups, was now at risk. She put the phone down. She pressed both palms flat against the kitchen table. She breathed the way she had taught herself to breathe during her comprehensive exams. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Then she picked up her laptop and started applying. She applied to 17 positions in 12 days. Research positions, lab positions, teaching positions, anything in biomedical engineering in Korea, Japan, or Singapore that accepts foreign applicants and offers visa sponsorship. She received 3 interviews, 2 rejections, 1 offer. A junior researcher position at a small pharmaceutical company in Suwon that paid half of what BioSoul paid and came with no family stipend. She accepted it. She contacted the immigration office and filed for a visa change. She contacted her mother's hospital and negotiated a payment plan. She contacted her father and told him she was fine. She was not fine. But fine, like so many things, was a decision she was going to make true by acting on it until it was. She started the new job on a Monday. The lab was small. The equipment was older. The team was kind. She did her work the way she always did, completely precisely without asking for permission to be excellent. 3 things happened during this period that she did not expect. First, she missed the work. Not BioSoul. The work. The organ scaffold. Her architecture. She had designed a lattice structure that mimicked the vascular network of a real kidney, with a precision that no one else in the field had achieved. It was the best thing she had ever built, and it was sitting in a lab she no longer had access to, being handled by someone who didn't understand it. Second, she was angry. Not at Min-soo, or not only at Min-soo. The system. The way the world was built so that a woman could do everything right and still lose everything because a man in a boardroom needed a narrative. Third, she kept working on the scaffold. At home. At night. On her own laptop. Using her own notes. Because the design was hers. The methodology was hers. The intellectual property clause in her fellowship contract had a carve-out for independently developed work. She had read it carefully before she signed. She always read carefully. She was not a woman who gave away things she had built. Min-soo did not recover from firing her. This was new for him. He recovered from everything. He recovered from a hostile takeover attempt in 2023 by buying the other company's debt and forcing a merger on his terms. He recovered from a product failure by restructuring the entire R&D pipeline in 6 weeks. He recovered from a PR crisis involving a board member's embezzlement by personally appearing at a press conference and delivering a 7-minute statement so precise that no journalist could find a follow-up question. He did not recover from this. The organ scaffold project stalled within a month of her departure. The new researcher, a PhD from KAIST with an impeccable CV and none of Adi's architectural instinct, could not replicate her results. The lattice collapsed under flow testing. The vascular mapping was off. The data that had been so clean under her hands became noisy, then unreliable, then useless. The board wanted answers. Min-soo provided none because he had none to give that would not expose what he had done. He began to investigate, quietly, through channels. He asked his assistant to request the original lab logs from the period Adiz had worked. He read every entry. He compared her notes to the post-departure failures. The pattern was unmistakable. She had built something that only she understood. Not because she had hidden information, but because the understanding was in her hands, her instinct, her way of seeing the problem. It could not be transferred by documentation. It was her. Then he found something else. Buried in the HR file from her original application, a section he had not reviewed during her employment because he had deliberately avoided any file that contained personal information about her, was a detail that stopped him completely. Under family medical disclosure, she had listed a parent with chronic kidney disease. The company's family medical stipend had been approved. The partner hospital in Detroit had been coordinating her mother's dialysis through the BioSoul network. He had cut off her mother's treatment. Not intentionally, not knowingly, but effectively. The stipend was tied to employment. The visa was tied to employment. The hospital coordination was tied to the visa. The entire architecture of care, the reason she had come to Korea in the first place, had been dissolved by his signature. He sat with this for a very long time. He had built a company worth trillions. He could engineer solutions to problems most people couldn't even formulate. He could not engineer his way out of what he had done to one woman and her mother 3,000 miles away. He picked up his phone. He called the Detroit hospital. He did not introduce himself as the CEO of BioSoul. He introduced himself by name only. He asked what it would take to reinstate the medical coordination. He was told the patient's daughter, the sponsor, had already arranged a payment plan independently. She had already fixed what he had broken. Without him. Without asking him for anything. He put the phone down. He looked at the Seoul skyline from the 34th floor. And for the first time in his adult life, Choi Min-soo felt something that his money, his control, and his reputation could not fix. The secondary offering proceeded. The board got their clean narrative. Min-soo gave them what they wanted and took none of it as a victory. 2 weeks later, legal called. Mr. Choi, we need your attention on a filing. A patent application has been submitted to the Korean Intellectual Property Office for a novel organ scaffold architecture. The applicant is Adiz Nauna Konkwo. The filing cites independent development under the carve-out in her former fellowship agreement. He read the filing. Every word. Every diagram. Every claim. It was extraordinary. She had not only continued the work, she had improved it. The new architecture solved the vascular mapping problem that had plagued the BioSol team for months. The lattice was more stable, more efficient, more elegant than anything that had come out of his company's labs. And it was hers. Completely, unambiguously, legally hers. The IP carve-out was airtight. He had approved the contract himself years ago for a different reason, to attract top researchers who didn't want to surrender their independent work. He had never imagined it would be used by someone he had fired. He read the filing again. Then a third time. Then he read the part that made his hands go still. The patent application included a section on clinical application. A proposed pathway for using the scaffold in bioartificial kidney construction. The data modeling suggested the architecture could reduce dialysis dependency in end-stage renal disease patients by 40% in a 5-year clinical window. Her mother had kidney disease. She had been building a scaffold for kidneys. She had come to Korea to save her mother's life. She had lost her job, her visa, her mother's medical network. She had gone home and built a better version of the thing they had taken from her. And she had built it for her mother. He sat in his office and pressed his palms against his eyes and did not move for a very long time.